What is up, guys? It's me, Mukil, and welcome back to my channel, The Brain Purpose, the place where you can know it all. In our last video, we were talking about our moon. In case you did not see that video, the link has been provided in the description box below to watch it later. Now, we shall start another topic, space vehicles and gadgets. Now, how do you think we know so much about space? We got to know about space with the help of rockets, satellites, spacecrafts, rovers and etc. But how do these things work? Watch till the end to find out with a lot of interesting facts about spacecrafts on our way. Now, let's get to our today's topic. Spacecraft. A spacecraft is a vehicle or machine designed to fly in outer space. A type of artificial satellite, spacecrafts are used for a variety of purposes including communications, Earth observations, meteorology, navigation, space colonization, planetary exploration, and transportation of humans and cargo. Now, it's time to launch into space. A spacecraft is launched from a specially constructed launch pad where the space vehicle and the rocket that propels it are set up and carefully inspected and supervised in the nearby control center. When all preparations are complete, the rocket engines are fired and the rocket and spacecraft lift off. Now let's look at the history of space landing. In the year 1957, the Soviet Union launches Sputnik, the first satellite. In the year 1972, Soviet Union launches the world's first space station, Salyut 1. In the same year of 1972, the US sends its first space station called Skylab into orbit. In 1976, Viking 1, the spacecraft, lands on Mars. In 2003, American Space Shuttle Columbia breaks up and 7 astronauts die. Now, let's talk about the Saturn V rocket. The mighty Saturn V rocket was built to send American astronauts to the moon. It was giant as it stood 363 feet high on the launch pad and with its fuel tanks full and ready for launch. It weighed more than 6 million pounds. The ground shook for miles around when the engines fired. 3 astronauts traveled in an Apollo spacecraft perched on top of the rocket. 13 Saturn V rockets were launched between 1967 and 1973. The last one launched the first American space station, Skylab, and no one has built bigger or more powerful rocket engines yet. Come on guys, let's travel into space. A rocket has to reach a speed about 17,500 miles per hour to place a spacecraft in orbit around Earth. If it fails to reach this point, the spacecraft will fall back to Earth. The Apollo astronauts who traveled into space on a Saturn V rocket moved at almost 25,000 miles per hour, which is faster than any humans in history. Going up. As the countdown clock ticks down to take off time, the rocket's tanks are filled and the scientists check the whole rocket to make sure that everything is working correctly. Then as the clock reaches 0, the engines are fired. Jets of burning gas pour off the engine's nozzles with enough force to lift the rocket off the ground and boost it all the way into space. In space. As a rocket climbs into space, its nose opens and the spacecraft inside comes out. The spacecraft continues to orbit the Earth or sets out on a longer journey to the moon or the planets. The rocket's job is done, so it falls back through the atmosphere into the ocean below. Living in space. Living in space is very different from living on Earth. In space, There is no oxygen, so astronauts have to take it with them. They also have to bring all the food they will need. Everything floats in space, which makes it easy to lose things. The International Space Station receives regular deliveries by unpiloted spacecrafts carrying fuel, oxygen, and food from Earth. Space food. All the meals astronauts eat in space are planned before they go to make sure they eat a healthy diet. In space, some food is stored in a freezer, some are dried. So when astronauts want to eat it, they just add water. Some meals are heated in an oven. Some space food are dried and sealed in clear packets. Drinks come in foil pouches with a built-in straw to prevent spills. Food like meat are packaged in cans to seal the moisture. Space suit. When astronauts have to leave their spacecraft to work in space, they wear a protective gear called a spacesuit. It is like a one-person spacecraft. It supplies oxygen to breathe and keeps the astronaut at comfortable temperature. Coming home. When the time comes for astronauts to come back to Earth, their spacecraft descends into the atmosphere. It is so fast that it heats up until it glows and heat shield keeps it from melting. The Space Shuttle orbiter landed on a runway like an aeroplane and deployed a parachute to slow itself down. Space Shuttle disasters. The first Space Shuttle disaster was Challenger. The second disaster was the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster, which happened on 2003. Columbia was the oldest space shuttle. It led to the death of 7 astronauts. Space Station. A space station is a piloted spacecraft that stays in space. Astronauts visit a space station and usually live in it for a few months, and then a new crew comes in to replace them. Space stations are used to study the effects of long space flights on the human body and to carry out other scientific research. International Space Station. The International Space Station is so big and costs so much to build and put into space that 16 countries work together to share the cost and work. The first part, Zarya, was launched by a Russian rocket on November 20, 1998, and dozens more parts were launched by space shuttles and rockets. Crews traveled to the ISS by Soyuz spacecraft. The first space stations. The first space stations were tiny compared to the ISS. They had to be launched in one piece by a single rocket. Salyut 1. The first space station ever built, Salyut 1, was launched by the Soviet Union on April 19, 1971 and stayed in space for 6 months. Skylab. The first American space station, Skylab, launched in 1973. It was made from part of a Saturn V rocket. Mir. The Soviet Mir space station was the first to be built in space from parts launched separately. It orbited Earth from 1986 to 2001. Okay guys, that's the end for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and make sure to like, comment and subscribe to my channel The Brain Poppers. Goodbye.